Hello and welcome back to Craft Camp. Today I will be making this coaster and also this bookmark. We will be learning a basic Sashiko stitch and a little bit about the history of it. Alright, let's get started. To make this project, I'll be using this dark blue colored felt. We call it Night in our shop. I also have this fusible interface, and this I will use to make the backing for one of our pieces. I also have a pair of craft scissors, some small little snippers. I've got my cream colored embroidery thread. This is ecru, embroidery needles, and a thimble. I also have my pattern printed out on this sulky stick and stitch. This is one of my all-time favorite tools for doing embroidery. It allows you to just peel this right off and stick it on whatever you're going to embroider, and you can rinse it away with water. I'll also be using an iron or an easy press to seal this fusible interface. All right, let's get started. Okay, so I've gone ahead and cut out my pattern. I'm going to be making the bookmark with you today. So to get this started, I'll just peel it right off the backing. Be careful not to let this stick to itself. And then I'm just going to place this right along the corner. I'm going to leave a little bit of space because I want to have some room to work with. Just press it on there and then we'll cut it on out. One of my favorite things about Sashiko is that you don't have to use an embroidery hoop, so it already allows you to start without more materials. So for the coaster, I used all 6 threads in this one, and you can see it's a little bit on the thicker side. For the bookmark, I'm going to go ahead and cut that right in half. So I'll start off by getting my embroidery thread. And we want to have quite a bit because ideally we would not like to have to add another round of thread. We can if we need to. I had to when I did this one, but I'll just cut a little bit extra. And you can see I've got about a long arm's length. And then I'm going to pull this apart into 3 strands. So each strand has 6 little threads, and we'll just cut that right in half to 3. And this will make just a little bit of a finer texture with our little crosses. If you have a second person around, they can also give you a hand. All right, so I'll set that one aside, and we'll start off threading the needle. You can use a needle threader for this if you'd like. Sometimes if I fail a couple of times, I get frustrated and go grab my needle threader. So for this project, I'm not going to tie a knot on the end. Normally I would tie a knot on the end, but for this we want to keep it loose. You can see on this one, I left all my threads just kind of hanging. I didn't put a knot in there because I want this to lay flat. For the bookmark, I want this to be 2-sided, so I'm going to intentionally leave a little bit of extra length here. I'm going to start from the corner, and we can pick whichever corner we want, and just make sure you start in a corner, and we're going to go one direction. So we'll go all the way down, across, all the way up, across, and then all the way down again. Does that make sense? So just to be safe, I'll leave about 2 inches on the back. And this is where we really start to get into what Sashiko is. So now that I have that first stitch started, I'm going to put the needle in, bend the fabric so that it comes out right at the start of the next little X there. You can see it coming out. And instead of pulling it all the way through, I'm actually going to bend it down again and place it in the tail of that same line. This is where your thimble comes in handy. And if you push it too far, you can just pull it back, get it in there. I like to do maybe 3 at a time. Sometimes if you do more, it gets kind of hard to pull it through. So I'll just pull this through, and you can see I move the fabric along the needle. Then I'm just going to pull it through. And we want to be careful that we don't pull it all the way through since we didn't tie a knot. So keep track of that tail. We'll just pull it nice and tight. See, there we go. Now we have our first 3 stitches. Easy as that. All right, let's keep going. Sashiko originated centuries ago in Japan as a way for people who didn't have quite enough money to buy new fabric to repair their fabric and actually give it a lot of strength. I'm actually using the traditional colors for Sashiko, which is this indigo colored fabric, and they usually would use cotton or something similar, and a white thread. This is the traditional look for Sashiko, and I think it's really beautiful. Eventually, of course, people who had a little bit more money started to notice how beautiful it was, so it became more traditional in embroidering kimonos and other sort of things. All right, so now that I've finished this first row, you might be a little confused on what you're supposed to do. So we get to the end there, and I'm going to go ahead and just cross right over. You can see on the back. So I'll just go right over to this next line. And we could either start doing our fabric bend if we'd like, but sometimes for security, I like to pull it through on that first one. Real Sashiko artists can do this finger movement so quickly. It is incredibly impressive. They'll just be like pew, 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 and then the whole thing will be done. Pulling this through the felt can be a little bit trickier than if you were to use a lighter fabric like a cotton, and you definitely can do that. I like the felt because you can cut it and you won't have to worry about any fraying edges. It just stays together really nicely. All right, so I wanted to take a pause here because I had a little incident where I got a knot on the back of my thread. This can happen and it's no big deal, so let's figure out how to solve it. Usually I just back it right up, and this one's an easy one, so I can actually just pull it right apart. But if it's tighter, the best way to do it, make sure that you don't pull it any tighter than it already is, and use the tip of your needle just to work that knot apart. And most of the time you can get it unknotted, but if you can't, sometimes it's best to just cut your losses and cut the thread, and then you can go back in with the second piece of thread. All right, so I finished all 3 rows across. Now I'm going to switch to the other direction. This is pretty easy. We're pretty much going to be doing the exact same thing. So let's decide where I want to go in. I'm going to go at an angle down to this corner right here. Make sure to get it right in there. And for this direction, I think I can go all the way across in 1. And by the time you're done with these, you'll be a lot better at this hand motion, I promise. There we go. Our first row is pretty much done. All right, now we're going to move on down. So one more quick tip. If you accidentally mess up like I did right here, where I made this one just a little bit too short, it's really easy to take it out. Just make sure you pull your needle off the thread, and then I'm going to use my needle just to get it, hook it, and I'll just pull it right on out. And there we go. And now I can just rethread the needle and keep going. The best part is when you do the last stitch. It feels so good. Ta-da! All right, I like to get it pressed a little bit flat because sometimes it kind of warps when you're stitching. And I'll let you see the back here. I did make a little mistake. You can see right here where I looped through one of my side pieces. And since the tension is held, I'm not worried about it. I'm just going to leave it there and we'll cover it with our backing. But I just wanted you to see that sometimes little mistakes happen and it's okay. Okay, so for the next step, I'm just going to tuck those tails in to make sure that they don't get cut. And then I'm going to cut all along this black border. And I've got my big chunky scissors so I can do it nice and quick. There we go. Now that this is cut out, I'm going to rinse away that stick and stitch so it will be nice and pretty like this guy here. All right, so I've rinsed this out. It's all wet now. And I'm just going to press it with a towel just to get this excess moisture out. And then I'm going to just set it aside and let it dry. I also want to make sure that I shape the felt a little bit. You can see there's a little bit of a wobble in here and it's really easy. We can just kind of press it out with our fingers. And the great thing about felt is it will kind of reshape and dry in whatever way that you leave it. So we'll just set that aside and let it dry. All right, so I'm going to show you how I want to finish this off. You have a couple different options. What I'm going to use is use the exact same felt and fuse it with this interface here. You can do this with an iron, or I have an easy press, which makes it nice and easy. To start out, I'm just going to cut out a section of the fusible interface. I want it to fit on the square. It doesn't have to be perfect though. And you can see that my piece of interface here is smaller than the square. It fits right inside. It's not perfect, and that's exactly how we want it. Next up, I'm just going to cut out a section of felt that's about the same size. It doesn't have to be perfect right now. We're going to go back and trim it once it's fused. So we'll just leave a little bit of excess, and then I will place these together, and then we'll go ahead and iron this to fuse it together. You want to use a pretty high temperature when you're doing this. I have this set at 350 degrees, and I will let it sit for about 30 seconds to a minute. All right, it looks like this is all done. So to finish this up, I'm just going to trim the edges. We're going to be following that first line here. And there you have it, a beautiful handmade coaster that makes a great gift, and you've learned a brand new skill. Thank you so much for crafting along with me. I hope that you had as much fun as I did. You can find all of these tools and materials in our shop, feltpaperscissors.com, and I hope you'll join us next time.